The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for doing a story about me. It's very exciting.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is the Capital Confidential podcast. This episode features a conversation between Times-Union reporter Rachel Silberstein, my Capitol colleague, and New York's junior senator, the aspiring presidential contender Kirsten Gillibrand. The interview, which was recorded earlier this month, touches on the senator's family, her political evolution, and much more. When you're done listening to the interview, check out timesunion.com for 2 profiles of the senator. The first, which chronicles her earlier life, ran on Thursday, and the final piece will be available this weekend. Enjoy the show.
You often talk about your earliest memory, stuffing envelopes with your grandmother with her group of political organizers. Can you just talk a little bit about what that was like growing up around an Albany powerhouse like Polly Noonan?
So my grandmother was certainly my greatest political role model. She was somebody who, to me, was larger than life, and she loved public service, and she loved participating in politics. That first political memory is of me going into a campaign headquarters on a hot August day with a bunch of ladies stuffing envelopes in a campaign headquarters, and me realizing that these women were so empowered and self-actualized and wanted to make a difference and wanted to have a say, and they knew that grassroots activism was important and that their voices were important and they were willing to fight for what they believed in. And so they were real role models for me and inspiring. I liked the fact that my grandmother saw politics as an extension of helping people, that it was a way to bring communities together and help families. I loved that she thought it was worth her time to organize other women so that all of them could be heard. And I've very much taken a page out of her playbook in my own life, because everything I've been working on politically for the past 10 years is to organize women and to ask them to vote, be advocates, to run, and if they aren't willing to run, to support a woman who's running. And that's why we've raised, over $7 million for women candidates, including $1 million for women of color, because we want to change the players list. We want to change who has a seat at the table, and those are all lessons my grandmother taught me.
Since you represented your upstate congressional district, you've evolved on immigration and gun control. And last year in a 60 Minutes interview, you said, attributed it to the lens of upstate. Although you've, of course, lived in New York City for years and spent time in China, and the capital region where you grew up also has seen its share of gun violence. Is it fair, really, to blame upstate and its lack of exposure for your change in politics?
Yeah, no, I would not use the word blame at all. I was just trying to say I was only focused on the concerns of my upstate district, because, for me and for my family, we have a community that really appreciates hunting, values the Second Amendment. My mother was known to cook the Thanksgiving turkey and shoot the Thanksgiving turkey. And so my lens was one of just my own community, that I wasn't looking at guns from an issue of gang violence or inner city violence that I wasn't experiencing, and it wasn't on the top of the folks I was representing's list. But what I've also said is 10 years ago, I recognized right away when I went down to visit families in other parts of the state that were experiencing gun crime in their lives, that I realized I was wrong, that I should have cared, that I actually should have made sure I was looking at the lives of other people perhaps outside of my immediate community. And when I met families who lost young students, one girl was Naisha Pryor Yard. She was a teenager. She was just at a party with her friends, and she lost her life to a stray bullet. I not only met her parents, but I met her whole class, and I was convicted at that moment that I should have cared, and I had to do something to end gun violence. And so 10 years ago, I started working on my first anti-gun violence legislation, anti-trafficking, because the truth is, in a place like New York City or even Buffalo, guns are trafficked straight into these communities and sold out of the back of a truck by a gun trafficker. There's no chance for a background check. There's no gun show. There's no gun dealer, and there's no opportunity. It's just literally sold directly to criminals. And so I wrote that bill with some moms who had lost loved ones and with Commissioner Kelly. And now I've been leading on that issue ever since. So I now have a proud F rating from the NRA.
Okay, great. You've also defended your decision to call for Al Franken to resign after he was accused of sexual misconduct, even at the expense of losing donors, right? And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the Albany legislature, which last week was trying to reckon with its own history of sexual harassment. And I know this came up in 2012 when you were running against Wendy Long. I was wondering if you regret sort of standing by, like a lot of Democrats, Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, when Republicans were calling for him to step aside from his leadership role in light of revelations that he abetted the covering up of sexual harassment.
Yeah, I definitely did not stand by Sheldon Silver, quite the opposite. I said in the middle of one of my debates that we have to hold people accountable, and that the best thing about these hearings that's going on right now is they're being led by Alessandra Biaggi, who I supported in her campaign against Jeff Klein. And I supported 4 candidates against the IDC because I thought that Andrea Stewart-Cousins should be the rightful leader of the state Senate, that our state has elected a Democratic state Senate, and I wanted her to be in the room. So I'm not surprised that Alessandra is using her new position to have the first sexual harassment hearings in 27 years. It's really amazing, and I'm really proud of her. And I think we do have to stand up, even against our party, when they're wrong. And I have a record of doing that in my entire time in public service.
You've also made motherhood a focal point of your campaign, and of course you've been pushing a national paid leave plan for years. Can you talk a little bit about how juggling the demands of parenthood with the demands of your job has been a common theme throughout your career?
So one of the reasons why I've made making a work-life balance possible for families all across New York and now all across the country is because it matters. We need national paid leave. Every time a new baby is born, every time a parent is sick or dying, every time a family member is ill or needs your help, for a lot of women and men, parents in general, they might not have any vacation days. They might not have any sick days. And so they can't meet that family need. And if they have to meet that family need, they might have to quit their job, which means they won't have an income. So that's why we need paid leave. It's also why I fight for equal pay for equal work, because women don't earn $1 on the dollar. White women don't earn $1 on the dollar, same work as white men, and women of color earn even less. It's why I fight for universal pre-K and affordable daycare, because women need to know that their children are getting access to good early childhood education. And if they can afford that, and have opportunities for Head Start programs and good daycare programs, their kids are going to thrive, and they're going to be able to be in the workplace so they can earn for their family and work their way up the ladder and get to a place where they can earn their fullest potential. So because I know what this struggle actually is like, it's why I'm trying to change the landscape and the structure of the workplace, because it doesn't reflect the actual face of the workforce.
So can you talk a bit, I know Don Jr. tweeted, about whether it's edgy to campaign as a parent. Is there something radical about, for a woman in office, campaigning on the fact that she's a mother? Like, why hasn't it been done before?
Well, I don't know, but for me, it's just who I am. And so I see the world in this lens of what it's like to be a working parent. And these things are hard. And, one of the reasons why I've been trying to elect so many more women and diverse women is because we want to change outcomes in Washington. We have to change the players list. We have to change who has a seat at the table. And I think women have a very different lens. I mean, just what Alessandra Biaggi is doing right now in our local government, what we're seeing done by members of Congress who just got elected, the most diverse class in the history of America. They're making a huge difference, and they're willing to speak truth to power and focus on issues that perhaps Congress wasn't focused on because, they're dominated solely by, white men who may not have lived our experience and may not have had our struggles or challenges. And so I just think it's who I am, and I think I'll bring a different approach to why we get things done, because I will fight for other people's families and children as hard as I would fight for my own. And that that passion and that determination to protect everyone's community and families will change what we fight for and what we get done. And we will find more common ground because everybody loves their kids. Everybody loves their families. It doesn't matter if you're from a red part of the country or a blue part of the country. What our common bond is.
So on a kind of related note, I know you've sworn off corporate PAC money for your presidential campaign, and you're touting your record of taking on corporations. Could you talk about, has your past work as a corporate attorney, has that offered you a window into the way corporations work and how to fight them when their interests conflict with the public's interest?
So it wasn't really my work as a lawyer that gave me that lens, although a little bit. What really has informed me is the last 12 years I've been in Congress, and I can tell you Congress is broken because there is so much corruption. Bills do get written in the dead of night by lobbyists who are paid so much money by the most powerful interests in the country to do their bidding. And that's has to change. The reason why we can't pass common sense gun reform in this country is because the NRA is largely funded by the gun manufacturers who care more about profits and gun sales than they do people and communities. They don't care if the person wants to buy the guns on the terror watch list. That's why they oppose restricting access to guns for people on the terror watch list. They don't care if the person has grave mental illness and a violent background or a violent criminal conviction. That's why they're against universal background checks. They don't care that someone can buy a bump stock and take a weapon and make it into a military-style weapon. And that's why they're against bump stocks. And those weapons are designed solely to kill large numbers of people really quickly. They're military-style weapons. So they don't care. They care more about profits. And that, to me, is not capitalism. That, to me, is greed. And you look at any issue where you're trying to change something and it's not happening, you will find a corporate interest where greed is more important than common good. And if you look at the opioid industry, they wanted to sell more drugs to more people that were more addictive because they wanted more drug sales. They didn't mind that they were highly addictive and they might get into the wrong hands. Any problem you want to solve, just follow the money.
That does tie in, I guess, to my next question. I guess the biggest parallel I noticed in sort of going through everything that, since the beginning, you've sort of been taken on a number of public health causes, fighting for veterans affected by Agent Orange. Of course, there was the 9/11 First Responders Bill. You weighed in for victims of pollution in Hoosick Falls. So I just wonder, a big deal was sort of made of your defending Philip Morris when you were attorney. Did that experience sort of help you figure out how to address these type of public health crises or take on the opioid crises? There's got to be, similarities there.
What I recognized when I was at, this big fancy law firm is I realized that I was really deeply unhappy. I didn't like the work I was doing. I didn't feel like I was helping people. I wasn't making the difference that I thought I was built to make. And it's why I searched for so long to get into public service. And I tried all these different ways and I kept failing. I tried to go work in the U.S. Attorney's Office and I didn't get the job. And then I tried to work in a bunch of charities. I didn't even get an interview. I tried to work on Hillary Clinton's first Senate race and I had no relevant experience. So when I finally got this opportunity to do public service at the end of the Clinton administration, I was so happy because every day I would just jump out of bed because I knew that I was helping people. And when Bush v. Gore happened and there were no more appointed positions, that's when I realized I really had to run for office. Because my definition of success had just changed. I didn't want the corner office. I didn't want the big paycheck. And that wasn't who I am. And I realized I wanted to use all those gifts that God had given me and all that education and any talent I have towards helping other people. And that's why public service became my calling.
Gotcha. All right, so can we circle back to your grandmother again? She clearly was a very dynamic force in Albany politics in the 70s and 80s and a huge influence on your life. But she was also very colorful, and we have a lot of Times Union archives about her. In one 1980 article, she was quoted as saying, it was all those Jews who voted for Ted Kennedy and not Jimmy Carter on the night of the New York presidential primary. The reporter who wrote it said even at the time the comment was surprising. And of course, a lot of us have older relatives with sort of antiquated, embarrassing views. I wonder what you make of these sort of anecdotes.
I never heard that one. That's pretty offensive. I've never heard it before,
yeah.
And that's very offensive to me.
Do you kind of see it in sort of a cultural context of the time?
It's certainly not how I saw my grandmother. And, at that time, I'm sure I was about 10. So, looked up to my grandmother, somebody who just believed in women and believed in women's voices, and somebody who believed that public service was a way to help people and that it was something that you should aspire to. What I loved about her was that she just wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid of anybody. And for a woman of her era to not be afraid to use her voice and to be heard, I think was quite revolutionary. And the fact that she was in a man's world when very few women chose to do that also inspired me. She dared to be different, and so I've always dared to be different. So my perspective of her is very different than anybody who was a peer of hers at the time, because I was just a young girl looking up at somebody who was doing something really brave in my mind.
And I was wondering, like, you know, there's several of your colleagues in the Senate now are running for president in 2020. 3 of them are women. I was wondering if you, like, how do you intend to differentiate yourself from them? How do you feel about them all being in the race?
Well, I think it's amazing that we have 6 women running for president of the United States. I think it's so exciting that the American people will get to see more of what female leadership looks like in all our forms and in all our backgrounds and all our priorities. And I'm really excited because it will create a new conversation about what leadership in America looks like. And that being said, I think all of us have very different stories. I think we all come from different places. We have different experience. We have different vision and different priorities. And I think my experience is quite different. As a mom of young kids, as I told you, I do see the world in a certain way. I want to fight for other people's children. I get angry when President Trump demonizes anyone, when he separates parents and children at the border. These are the things that infuriate me, when he demonizes even transgender children who are the last person in the world that you should be demonizing. They need our protection and our support. And so I do see the world differently. And also I come from a place that's different than a lot of Democrats. I mean, coming from a district that I represented that was 2-1 Republican, a lot of rural areas with manufacturing, agriculture. I've served on the Agriculture Committee for 12 years in Congress. I've served on the Armed Services for 12 years in Congress, and I've served on the Environment and Public Works Committee for the last 10 years in the Senate. And in each of those roles, I've been able to be a voice for red, blue, and purple America, for our state. Our state is diverse. We are, fairly red, in upstate New York, fairly purple in our suburbs and on Long Island, and very blue in New York City and in our upstate cities. And so we just have diversity everywhere. And my record of being able to bring people together in the state is really strong. I have the highest vote total of anybody ever in our state at 72%. And that's unique. That's a higher vote total than anyone's ever run in our state ever. And it's because I do well in all the places, in the red, blue, and purple places. And I also pass a lot of legislation. Even in the last Congress with Republican House, Senate, and President, I passed 18 bills. And common sense bills, things like investing more in rural broadband or investing in our regional Made in America strategies so we have more rural manufacturers, investing in our baby boomers who want to retire and sell their businesses to their employees. They're all common sense solutions that I got from talking to New Yorkers about their challenges and what they want fixed. So I have a good record of finding common ground with Republicans and actually getting bills passed. And I can pass big bills like the 9/11 health bill, which we've already passed twice unanimously, and civil rights bills like Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, when it was not something that was being done on the federal level. And I'm not afraid. I stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I've stood up to the Department of Defense twice, once in Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and again to end sexual violence. I stand up to corporate America when they're wrong. That's why I voted against the bank bailout twice and supported transaction tax. And I will stand up to my party when they're wrong, which I've done many times, and we've already talked about some of those instances.
We got time for one more question if you got one, because she's got to run during an event.
Okay, this is the last one. This is more factual. We're covering sort of getting into your 2006 win against John Sweeney, which was like a major upset in the Capital Region. Like you said, it was like 2-1 Republican. We learned that members of the Pataki's administration, including like Xenia Muka, facilitated the release of a police report of a domestic violence incident involving Sweeney and his wife. I just want to know if you were aware of how that went on, because I know that race really raised people's estimation of you as a candidate and as a politician, and I was just wondering how involved you were with that.
Yeah, not at all, and I don't know how it was released. I don't know at all.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for covering so many good topics, and I hope to meet you in person next time I'm in Albany.
And that's the show. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, you'll love reading more about Gillibrand's political rise in print and online this Sunday. And if you helped leak the 911 audio transcript in 2006, please feel free to give us a call. Listeners should also leave us a positive review wherever they download podcasts. It helps listeners like you discover the show. And while you're at it, why not just confront strangers on the street if they're not listening? We'll be back next week with an all-new episode, and coming soon after that is an in-depth series of podcasts that will look back at a tumultuous time in the state's history. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
Just heard I tried to get you.
Ah! This day sucks!